I remember seeing someone working there pull out this, I think, over $15,000 Met Alligator wallet from underneath a pile of random accessories and other wallets. It had no dust bag or a box for protection, and then they just kind of threw it on the glass counter in front of me, which is definitely not how you'd want my things to be handled if I left things with this company for consignment. Hi guys, my name is G.P.S. and welcome back to my channel. We usually talk about shopping on here, but today I thought that I would share with you my experience of reselling designer pieces that either did not work out for me or I just simply got over them after a while, because I'm definitely not the kind of person who would keep compiling things just for the sake of having them, when these things could go to someone who would appreciate them more or could potentially take more advantage of them than I ever would. And I think this is the perfect time to discuss this topic, considering that with a lot of us being home, we're cleaning out our closets and we're finding pieces that we don't necessarily care for anymore. So I thought that we would explore the different options that we have for reselling items together. And last year, before I resold my very first designer piece, I did, I would say, an extreme amount of research on some of the biggest resale companies out there, including the RealReal, Vestiaire Collective, the REBAG and Fashionphile, just to mention a few of them. And today I thought that I would share with you my personal experience and some of the ugly truth that a lot of them are not sharing with you. So if that sounds interesting to you, then please keep on watching. The first company that I want to talk about, the one that did not work out for me at all, is REBAG. And I will share with you the pros first, and then I'll work my way towards the cons. I'll try to be as positive as I possibly can be. And then you have to kind of make up your own mind and prioritize what are the most important qualities for you in a company and what are things that you're less interested in. One of the biggest advantages that REBAG has is that they offer buyouts. Buyouts was very important for me when I was selling my pieces, because I personally find that if I have a larger item that I want to sell, larger in terms of price and cost, I don't really want to have it sitting there with a company on consignment. I would much rather take it in, have it evaluated, and if the company is happy to take it, I would much rather be done with it and just get a buyout from them. What you have to keep in mind with all of these companies, or at least the ones that offer a buyout, is that every time you opt for a buyout, you're going to get less money than you would if you leave something for consignment, because the company has to give you the money up front. They don't know how long it's going to take for the bag to sell, and they're taking a big risk because they're out of money and they're taking in this item that they're not quite sure about. So they tend to be a little bit more conservative when they're quoting you for a buyout option. But personally, it was very important for me to be able to opt for a buyout, especially if I'm leaving my item with a company that has a physical retail space, because I wouldn't want to have one of my pieces sitting in consignment at a store where hundreds of people go through it, touch it, interact with it. Maybe some people buy it, look at it at home, and then return it. And then by the time I get it back, if it doesn't sell within a couple of months, because some companies will return your items if they don't sell, it had gone through 1,000 different hands, and I just don't want that. I like to keep my things in great condition. So for me, it was very important for a company to offer a buyout, and REBAG does. Another advantage that I found with them is that they have a very easy online quoting system. They basically ask you to submit, I actually think that they ask you to submit quite a few pictures, much more than any of the other companies require you to do, which I kind of understand. They want to have a very thorough understanding of what you have at home, and you need to have some basic information, and based on that, you will either get a quote automatically if it's a smaller item, and then if it's a larger item, they will eventually send you a quote, I think, within a couple of days. And if you accept that quote, you can easily send in your pieces, and if you don't, you can easily decline it online. As I mentioned, they do have a couple of physical retail stores where you can either buy items or drop off your pieces for an evaluation. And from what I can see, all the items there are kept very nicely. They are handled very carefully and in a very respectful manner. And you might be surprised that I'm pointing that out, but wait for it. I cannot say the same thing about every single one of these companies. But as I mentioned, as far as I can tell, they take really good care of the bags that they have in stock, which might not be important for a lot of you if you're only selling, because once it's in the store, it's not your product anymore. But maybe if you're trying to buy from the resale market, I think you can be pretty assured that the Reebok tries to keep their things in pretty good condition. And then the last advantage, I think I'm going to leave until the end of this review because there are a couple of cons that I think will need to be kind of rebalanced with that. But I think the first con that I can think of is actually not that bad, but in case you're not someone who wants to spend a lot of time reselling, it might not be something that you want to do. When you submit an item for an online quote, they do require quite a lot of pictures. Compared to other online quoting systems, they definitely require more. I would say that you need at least about 5 to 7 pictures, and they're very specific about what pictures they need, which I can understand. As I mentioned, they want to have a good understanding of the pieces that they're going to buy, but it might not be something that you want to deal with. The second disadvantage wasn't that big again. It wasn't really the deal breaker for me. And it's the fact that they only take a very selected list of brands as well as categories. So some of the resellers that we'll talk about here, they take pretty much everything from bags through ready-to-wear all the way to accessories. Whereas with the Reebok, they, as the name suggests, they mainly take bags and then a very limited amount of SLGs. But as far as I know, I don't really see anything else being sold on their site, which is understandable. They focus on bags. But the reason why I decided not to move ahead with them to sell my bags is because they offer you the least amount of money compared to the other resellers. So for some of the items that I submitted, they were either brand new or in absolutely pristine condition. And personally, I was quite shocked when I received a quote from them, because if they were a company who is known for selling items way under retail, I would understand. If you take in a bag that you know is going to sell under retail through the company, of course you cannot expect them to pay you more than retail. But when it comes to Hermes bags, you usually get at least the retail bag as long as they're in good condition, if not a little bit more. And my intention was never to make money. All I wanted was to get the money back for them that I paid, because they were either in new condition or in absolutely pristine condition. And the quotes that I got were just shocking to me. These bags that they buy, I assume for 40 to 50% of the retail price, they sell 40 to 50% above retail, which just does not make much sense to me. The numbers just don't add up, in my personal opinion. So that was kind of a big turnoff for me, and I decided not to move ahead with them. However, I have to admit that due to the fact that they offer buyouts, I think they are a great company to go to if you're trying to sell a bag that doesn't really have much resale value. So for example, a Balenciaga bag or a Saint Laurent bag that's in good condition. Or if you have a larger bag, in terms of larger, I mean in terms of price. If you have, let's say, an Hermes bag that you're trying to sell, but it's not in great condition, then I would probably go to the Reebok, because they have a great selection of bags in different conditions. So as long as your bag doesn't have much resale value and you don't think it has the potential to resell at a higher price, then I think the Reebok is a good place to go. You can get paid out really fast. But if you're trying to sell a bag that has a higher resale value or is a little bit more expensive, I personally would not turn to the Reebok to do that. The second company that I went to, I actually had quite an interesting experience with. I ended up selling one item through them, but it wasn't a big piece. It was, I think, only a couple $100, and it was something that I ended up selling through them because none of the other resellers took. And the company I'm talking about is TheRealReal. I think when it comes to TheRealReal, we should start with the positives again, because there is actually quite a few. I think one of the biggest advantages is the fact that TheRealReal at this point is probably the largest and most well-established resale or consignment stores out there. They went public last year, which says a lot about their intentions for the future. And they are a company that I think is expanding rapidly. They have quite a few physical stores, and they are just really well known. They have a huge platform where they resell. So I think a lot of people know about them, which means that they have a quick turnaround time in terms of products. They accept a huge variety of items in terms of brands as well as categories. I think they're one of the only resellers that take pretty much anything. They take bags, of course, small leather goods, ready to wear, shoes, fine jewelry, as well as home. And when it comes to home items, they not only take designer home items, but I think they also take more like vintagey kind of things. So items that are more intricately designed or more unique and rare pieces. They don't necessarily have to be from Hermes or Gucci or another big luxury house who also makes furniture. So I think if you have more unique pieces, let's say a home item or a fine jewelry piece, then they're definitely a good place to go. Logistically, it's super easy to deliver your things to them. You can either visit them at one of their retail stores, you can go to their office, and they can even come to your house. If you have, I think, above a certain amount of items, they can even come to your house and review things with you and try to help you make up your mind if you want to get rid of things, which I think can be great. But what I found really interesting about the home visits is that when someone comes out from the RealReal to your house, they don't actually give you quotes. They don't actually review and authenticate the products. They actually just take it from you. And while you can have a conversation about the items, they don't really give you much insight into how much the product is going to sell for, which for me was probably one of the biggest downsides. And I was going to have the RealReal come out to me, look at some products and see if they would take anything. But the fact that they would just come out to your house, take the things, and wouldn't really give you that much insight into how much they're going to sell for was kind of a turn off for me. I decided not to do that. I found that it was just a waste of time. And of course, they can have a look on the website with you to see if there are any comparable items and how much those sold for. They cannot really do much more, which I understand they have a very rigorous way of authenticating items and justifying and making up quotes. But for me, I found that that just wasn't the best option for me. But if you have a huge variety of items that you need to get rid of, it's possibly something that you want to look into. And then the last pro, which can also be perceived as a con depending on what you're looking for, is the fact that they have physical retail spaces. And most of their stores, as far as I know, are situated in places where other luxury and high-end stores are. So for example, they have a store in Soho, nearby Chanel, Dior, and Louis Vuitton. And they also have one on Madison Avenue near stores like Chrome Hearts, a little bit above Elie Saab and Hermes. So it definitely gives kind of a prestige feel to the store. And if you're trying to get rid of your items fast, due to the fact that they are also in stores, it means that you're not only exposing them to people looking at the website, but you're also exposing them to people who are just shopping around and they might stumble upon the store, go in and pick up one of your items. So your chances are a little bit more increased at selling these pieces because you're also exposing these things to foot traffic. So let's talk about the downsides of selling through the RealReal. The biggest one for me, as I mentioned, was the fact that they solely do consignment. So it doesn't matter what you hand over, they're never going to buy you out. And when it comes to larger ticket items, namely Hermes bags, I don't want my expensive bags to be sitting at a store where hundreds or thousands of people go through them. And I do think you can ask them not to put them in stores, but then I don't know how effective it is to have physical stores. I feel like your chances are reduced if you only sell online with them. But at the same time, it's just not something that I would have wanted to do. But I did sell one item through them that was a smaller piece, as I mentioned, and it did sell. It took a little while, but it did sell through them. However, I didn't realize that there is not much transparency when it comes to their consignment. I sold an item that ended up being reduced in price. The company put it on sale without my permission. And when I got paid out, I think I got paid 40 or 50% less than the original amount I was supposed to be given because the item didn't sell within a certain amount of time. So they ended up putting it on sale without me knowing about it. I guess I could have tracked it because they do have an online system where you can see what's happening. But they never sent me an email saying that your item is going on sale. Would you approve this? They just put it on sale, it sold, and the money I was given was half of what I was initially told. So I'm sure that there is a fine print about it somewhere because I think they would legally have to disclose that you are taking the risk of your item going into sale, and you might be able to prevent that from happening by asking them to do that. But I had no idea about that, and by the time I realized that I'm only getting paid half of what I was supposed to, it was already too late because the item had already sold. So I want to bring your attention to that. Make sure you look at your contract or the terms and agreements, and make sure that if you don't want your item to go into the sale, even if it doesn't sell, then just let them know and ask them if there's an option for you to avoid that. The second con that I found was not really a big deal to me personally because I have never bought anything through the RealReal, and I think it would be more important for people to know if they're buying something from them, not really if they're selling. But they have been in the news from time and time again for allegedly selling counterfeits. I don't know if these cases have ever been confirmed or what was the outcome, but I wanted to let you know that this is something that was going around. I don't know if it's true, but it has been in the news a couple of times. The third downside that I found was probably one of the biggest ones for me, other than the fact that they only do consignment. But what I found really annoying is that it took absolutely ages to get an actual quote from them. So as I mentioned, when you submit an item, when someone comes to pick it up from your home or you send it in, I think I was told, and I might be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but if I remember correctly, I was told that each item goes to their warehouse in New Jersey, where it goes through very rigorous inspection and authentication. And then there are experts there, and only in that one warehouse, who can evaluate your product and put a price tag on it. So basically you have to wait for your item to arrive to their warehouse, and then it takes quite a long time for them to evaluate it, take pictures of it, and then give you a quote. I remember when I gave them that one item that ended up being sold through them, it took about 3 or 4 weeks for me to get an actual quote and to get an understanding of how much my item is going to be sold for. And personally, I cannot remember ever getting an email for my approval to accept the quote. I have a feeling that there must have been one, but I cannot recall when that happened. But anyway, so they basically look at your item in that warehouse, they authenticate it, and then they put a price tag on it. And then it goes onto their website, but it's such a long process. So if you're trying to sell your items fast, TheRealReal is definitely not the place for you, because everything takes a long time, which I think is due to the fact that they grew so fast. And at this point, I'm sure that they're taking in so much stock that it takes them a long time to go through everything. The last downside was the true deal breaker for me, and that was what really reassured me that I should never do consignment. I should always opt for buyout. And it's the fact that I don't find that these physical stores handle their items and their stock really carefully and well. I have been in their stores a couple of times with just the intention to browse around, see what they have to offer, because when it comes to Hermes, it can be hard to look at different bags in different sizes and colors because it's not an option for you to look at them in store. And I remember this one time that I was in there, I asked to see a wallet, and I remember seeing the person working there pull out this, I think, over $15,000 Met Alligator wallet from underneath a pile of other random accessories and wallets. It had no box or a dust bag for protection. It was just sitting at the bottom of the drawer. And then he pulled it out and kind of threw it on the glass counter in front of me, which is definitely not how I would want my things to be handled if it was with them for consignment. Because could you imagine having a $20,000 or $30,000 bag sitting with them, and that's how they handle it? They just throw it around and people are touching them, they're going in and out of it. It's just not something that I would feel comfortable with. The company that I've had the overall best experience with, and the one that I would recommend whether you're trying to buy or sell pre-loved items, is Fashionphile. I'm going to start with the pros again and then mention a couple of the cons that I try to pull out. But I think the biggest pro that I had with this company is the fact that they offer both buyout and consignment. I think when it comes to smaller items, they tend to offer you buyouts, but when it comes to a larger item like an exotic Chanel or an Hermes piece, they tend to give you the option to decide if you want to be paid up front or if you rather do consignment. Of course, if you do consignment, you're going to make a little bit more money, considering that there's less risk involved with it for the company. They're essentially only giving you space, but you do have to wait for your item to sell. Whereas if you opt for buyout, you're basically done with it and the bag belongs to Fashionphile from that point on. Another thing that I really like about them is that they buy and sell items somewhere around the retail price. There are, of course, exceptions when it comes to more limited and rare pieces that are harder to come by. But I found that based on the quotes that I was given and items that I looked at on their website, everything was pretty near the retail price, and the quotes that they gave me were all really fair and very reasonable. There wasn't one time when I was shocked by how low the quote was. Everything made a lot of sense, and it was, of course, based on the brand, how rare the piece was that I submitted a quote request for, and of course the condition. But I found that they were really fair with the quotes that I was given personally, as well as the pricing that they have online. Unlike the previous companies that we talked about, Fashionphile doesn't actually have a physical retail space. However, they do have 2 showrooms, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. And I do really like the option of bringing in my items in person and having them evaluated on the spot. Unlike RealReal, who also has the option for you to drop items off, Fashionphile actually authenticates and reviews and quotes everything on the spot, which for me was a huge advantage. And I think some of the larger pieces like Hermes Bags and fine jewelry have to go through a two-step authentication process, meaning that they will be reviewed at the showroom, but then they'll also be reviewed again when they arrive to the warehouse, and you will not be paid until that happens. I do like the fact that they give you an idea of how much money you can expect, and you're not in the dark in terms of how much money you will be paid, even though your item had already been shipped away. And then lastly, in case you don't live near one of their showrooms, they do have an online system where you can submit items for quotes, and I find it to be a very straightforward process. With REBAG, you have to submit a bunch of information and a bunch of different pictures that they require. Whereas with Fashionphile, you only really need the name of the bag, I think the condition that it's in, and a few pictures, and that's pretty much it. There are not certain requirements that you need to meet. I'm sure if you take pictures that are not really reflective of what it looks like in person because of the lighting or because of the quality of your camera, I'm sure they can adjust that, but I have found that the quotes that they gave me online were pretty spot on. It's only fair that we also discuss some of the downsides of selling through Fashionphile, because we discussed it with all the other companies. And I want to make sure that you have all the information available to you so you can make up your mind and decide which company you want to go with. And one of the cons that I found with Fashionphile is the fact that they have quite a limited list of brands that they accept, and they only take certain items from each one of them. So for example, they don't take ready to wear, they don't take home, and I think they do take shoes, but only very limited pieces. There are certain requirements that they have to hit. So I wanted to bring your attention to that in case you're trying to sell something that's maybe a home piece or ready to wear, Fashionphile is not the best place for you for that. And then lastly, I want to bring your attention to the fact that they are not really big on SLGs. Every time I submitted a request for a quote for an SLG for a small leather good, whether it was a wallet or a card holder, I found that the quotes were quite conservative. But if you have a look on their website, you can see that they are also selling small leather goods quite a bit below retail, so that might be the reason. It's just simply not their specialty. So if you're trying to get rid of your small leather goods, perhaps try to explore some other options or have a look for yourself, because I found that selling small leather goods is just really not their specialty. And this is it, guys. This completes my video on my experience of reselling designer pieces. I hope you found it helpful, and if you have any questions to me, you can always find me in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, then please make sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.